You know?
Love it. Love it. Well, I guess I'll start off with catching Carly and Memo up. Everybody else has been to a full table before.
Okay, cool.
So welcome you guys. But the basic idea behind full table is bring people together around a meal, a themed conversation, and in doing so, you take strangers and you make them have a connection and ability to dive in depth to a conversation. And so this is a super cool crew that we have on today to discuss van life and kind of the process behind that, challenges that come with it. Memo have a teardrop, spoiler alert, and so hear all about that, which will be fun. But as Brian gets on, I think we should pass it around, do quick intros of where you are, who you are, your connection to van life at this time, and then I'll pass it off to Graham and Allie, who are the full table chefs.
Hello.
And we'll intro the meal, and we'll dive on in. That sounds all right to everybody. I'll pass it off to Tony first.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Tony. I'm currently in Jackson, Wyoming. This is what I call home. And my connection to van life, my fiance Hannah and I, who unfortunately could not be here this evening, we converted a Ford Transit Connect. And those are like the mini little Napa or CarQuest vans you see driving around. You can't stand up in it or anything, but it's just enough room in the back, 6 feet exactly, where if I pop the front seat forward a little bit, I could stretch out and lay down. And we kind of built a conversion in that and lived in it almost a year. Our very first summer here in Jackson, we spent living in that van and avoiding expensive rent and trying to figure out what we were doing with our lives.
That's
And that is my connection to van life.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Brian.
There he is.
Sorry I'm late to the party.
No, welcome, Brian. Brian, tell us who you are, where you are, and your connection to van life.
My name is Brian Flint. I'm in Jackson, and my connection to van life, my background and kind of profession is in architecture and some furniture building. And I've always been kind of interested and intrigued with how to make things as multi-purpose, functional, like space efficient as possible. And most recently, I was talking to a buddy who's built out, I think it's his second Sprinter van, and he was showing me what he's done, and it just really got me intrigued to get into it more and kind of utilize the stuff I like doing just for fun with my hands and try to get more into. So I haven't ever lived in a van or had a van, but something I've always been intrigued by, or like wanting to fix up campers or just do something like that where you can really have a comfortable place to live and not have your home kind of restrict you from being able to do stuff you want to do. That's it.
There we go. Devon and Nick, how about you guys?
I'll let Nick go first.
So when Devon and I first met, I was really interested in van life, and Devon was about to go on a trip in a converted van, and we spent a month, 2 months.
Yeah, so I guess we'll go together. So I went to that after about a month after we met. I had already been planning with a buddy of mine to go. We had just bought a van. What was it?
It was like an '86 Van Dura.
And so him and I built it out, and it was pretty rushed. He focused a lot on the sound system, not so much on like the interior or
The engine.
or any of that stuff. And so him and I drove across country, and then his girlfriend and Nick came out and met us. So I spent about 2 months on a trip in that van. We broke down in Arizona and had to put a whole new transmission in, so that was crazy.
By ourselves.
Yeah, so that definitely turned me off to living in a van that's, or any kind of vehicle or having a vehicle that's not very reliable. That was an experience where I really felt the importance of having a reliable vehicle, especially if it's going to be your home as well. But it was great, camping and, the ability to move freely night to night, and not having to worry about where you're sleeping. And then
Like what, 4 or 6 months later, we bought a camper for $100.
on
Slide-in
eBay,
camper.
it's like a 76 slide-in cab over camper.
Yeah, with like holes in the roof and holes in the floor, and it was rusted out. So I had gotten my job at the Village when we were back in New York.
Oh, we're in Jackson, by the way, for those.
Oh yeah, we're in Kelly.
Wyoming.
So we were in New York and we bought the camper for like $100. So we spent like 4 months fixing the camper out. We put in a composting toilet and like.
With the intention of moving out here and living in it. So we took like it, it had the shower system and all the things that come in the camper. We stripped everything out of it, completely gutted it, and then insulated it and put
Wood stove.
Yeah, it was pretty minimal. We had a wood burning stove. We had a composting toilet.
New
and
fence.
And then just the bed space, and then the countertop. And we could go deeper into that, like the specifics of what that looked like.
But we ended up getting this place, which is like a tiny home.
So he lived in that for about 2 months when he first came out here, and he came out before me.
Yeah.
And by the time I flew out here and came to live here, we had found another place, which is this bully barn, which is a 200 square foot shed, essentially, that's been renovated, that we've been doing a lot of work to. So this is not quite van life, but it's a tiny home, like a mini home.
And then I just bought a ProMaster.
Yeah.
And we're doing that.
So yeah, in the process of renovating an actual reliable van that's not going to break down. That's really exciting. So we've been doing a lot of work with that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And then I believe we just have Carly and Memo left before we pass it off to the chefs.
Yeah, sure. So basically, about a year ago, Carly and I quit our jobs in Dallas and decided to buy a teardrop trailer and drive around the country. And so we kind of didn't like living in Dallas. There wasn't a lot of outdoor opportunities to get outside. And so that's kind of our little story.
Yeah, so we were living on the road for a year, but then in the pandemic, now we're at my parents' house. So we've been here for the last, is it 2 months now, I think, since everything started. So, yeah.
And that's in Denver, right?
Yeah, in Littleton, Colorado. Yeah, outside Denver. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been hanging out there. I've been studying. I took the GMAT, so I think I'm going to potentially do an MBA in the fall. But we'll see. Still kind of a lot up in the air with the pandemic and kind of what things look like. So I'm not too sure yet, but kind of taking it week by week, day by day, and just kind of,
Is the teardrop parked outside?
No, unfortunately, it's not. It's parked at Carly's dad's cousin's.
Someone
house.
else's garage.
Yeah, so he's got an extra garage space, and he said he'd store it for us for a little bit, so we didn't have to.
He was supposed to store it for 2 weeks, but yeah.
It's been a while since it's run out. We miss it for sure.
Yeah.
It's been, so we lived in it on and off for about, 7 months, something like that. So,
a full year.
yeah, and I pulled off a little Subaru Outback, so yeah, it's more of a reliable car, and fortunately we didn't have too many kind of road issues or transmissions going out or anything crazy like some of you guys, but yeah, so
Beautiful. And then Graham and Allie, if you have a connection to van life, but otherwise, we'd love to hear about what we're eating and why we're eating it.
For sure. I'm Graham.
And I'm Allie.
So actually, coincidentally, a couple of weeks ago, we had been talking to our friend who quit his job about a year ago and moved into his van. And he was just saying that he's eating like a lot of pasta and canned sauce and just wasn't sure like what else he could make that would be an easy one-pot meal. And so we were thinking about things that you could make in a van stove, or if you don't have a van stove, well, I heard you guys said you had a wood burning oven, so I would love to hear about how that possibly works, but I'll come back to that, I guess. But so we were thinking about things that you could even carry like in a backpack into the backcountry and cook on. A camping stove, things that you wouldn't have to worry about like going bad in your backpack. So we had a bunch of different ideas, but this was one. Essentially, like you can take onions, carrots, garlic, shrimp paste, or the curry paste, canned coconut milk, canned chicken stock, and you could have that in your backpack for a couple of days and it wouldn't be any problem to take that into the backcountry. And I think a lot of times it can get pretty boring eating the same things like oatmeal in the morning for breakfast, and then Cliff Bars for lunch, and then sure, like burritos and stuff and like eggs are great, but eventually I think our friend has been living in his van now for like close to a year, and so he was starting to go a little bit nuts. But yeah, so that's kind of where the idea came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. And then it's easy to modify. Like if I had included the totally like tricked out version with all the aromatics and all the extra stuff that like I would put in at home. But what's so great about curry paste, or like honestly even like bouillon cubes, like stuff like that, is that it can incorporate so much flavor and so much seasoning and honestly like so much salt that you don't need to even carry salt. So, and I'm not sure if salt is necessarily that important for people, but it's very important for me. And I think that having those seasonings can really change your everyday life and make it a little bit more interesting. And so that's what's great about curry paste or shrimp paste or something like that, is that it really has such a high shelf life because the salt level is so high. And it's easy enough that you can pack it up, wrap it in some aluminum foil or plastic wrap, and stick it in the back of your fridge if you have one, and it stays practically indefinitely. Yeah, and I think that's it. Right now we're in Boulder, Colorado. We're out of San Francisco, but we're quarantining with our friends out here in the nature, and it's been very fun. And we're stoked to hear about your van life and how the food came out. What do you guys think of the recipe? Was it easy, challenging? Did you have a hard time finding anything? I'd love to hear what everyone has to say.
Could anybody in the Jackson area find the lemongrass stalks? That was my biggest predicament. I wasn't sure if small town Wyoming had lemongrass available.
I was able to find it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, what you were gonna say, I was able to find it at the Jackson Hole grocer in like the little, they have the little plastic like herb section in the cooler by the salads.
Yeah.
It comes with like one little stalk in it.
Perfect. That's all you need.
I didn't even look over there. I couldn't find green curry paste, so we're using yellow curry.
That's okay.
Good enough, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, our oven currently isn't hooked up in our space, so we actually did cook this on a camper oven.
Oh,
Nice.
sick.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I think it's great. I wish I would have probably allocated more time to doing it, because I think letting it sit and just soak for a couple hours would be great. But of course, us last minute decided to do it, with 35 minutes before this. So it's here, we're eating, it's good. And but yeah, no, I don't know. I like it. I think we'll add it to our list of things to make.
We are like king and queen of rice and beans, so this is awesome. Because that's what we eat. I love it. I'm always hungry enough that it tastes good, but I mean, yeah, stuff like this is a big help.
Cool. And what's great is that it's relatively quick too. Like it's sweat vegetables, add paste, add liquid, cook, done. And like you said, it is phenomenal the next day. And you can like reheat it in the morning and throw a couple eggs, like crack a couple eggs in it and cook it like in the sauce. Oof. So good.
There you go.
Yeah, probably what we're doing tomorrow.
I guess I will start off with a broader question for you all. Just kind of like what prompted each of you, and kind of can bounce around however now, but what kind of prompted you to explore the van life world? I know MJ and I have discussed getting into it in the past. definitely a romantic way. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to have it parked outside and then we can go and explore for a whole week and not have to worry about camping in the cold and such and all that. And I think even a more long-term vision together, I think it's an interesting option. We now have a puppy, so that throws a little wrench in it. So Tony, I'm curious to hear if you lived out of it with Yeti, and then Nick and Devon with Griffin as well. But yeah, just kind of curious to what initially got you into it, and what was the big pull for you.
Yeah, I can start on that one. Hannah and I had always kind of had a lure towards van life, I think, and maybe looking back on it, it was a little bit of Instagram and a little bit of just our curiosity to go and explore. And we had just relocated from northern Minnesota to Colorado, and we're kind of trying to figure out post-college, like where we wanted to be. And we ended up moving to Dillon, Colorado in Summit County, and just found that it's like, we were there for a winter and found a challenge finding community. It felt like we were living in like a strip mall area, and the traffic on the weekends and all the Denver nights coming up every Friday, Saturday. It was just like a lot and didn't quite feel like a place that we wanted to call home. So we decided to start looking at vans, and we had a friend of ours whose dad had converted a van, and his wife passed away, and his way of grieving was kind of taking this van that he had converted and going around the country and traveling to all these different places. So we had somebody fairly close to us who was doing just that, and he would come visit us. He was a good friend of ours as well. So that was a little bit of the inspiration and kind of got us onto the dispersed camping and boondocking and not paying for campsites and really figuring out, all right, aim for the green on the maps and the national forest and the BLM land, and really kind of opened our eyes to like some of the tricks of van life. So yeah, when we were living in Colorado, we ended up buying a Ford Transit Connect in Chicago, Illinois. My parents lived just over the border in Wisconsin, and my dad went and looked at it for me. And he's like, yeah, I think this looks like a good van. And I ended up flying back and driving it back to Colorado, where Hannah and I went to Lowe's, had them pre-cut everything for us, and built a fairly basic setup. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with these Transit Connects, but they're pretty small. The whole back of ours is a bed. There's not a place you can like swing your legs off and pull your pants on. You're kind of like shimmying them on in bed. But we did make it all in hinges, so everything flips over, and we have like storage underneath, and it all opens up like compartments. So we had it fairly livable. This was prior to Yeti joining the tribe. So when we were really traveling, so we left Colorado and decided neither of us had spent a lot of time on the West Coast, and we wanted to do, it was mainly focused on national parks, but we were also trying to visit different towns and figure out maybe where we wanted to settle down. So it took us all over. I mean, Nevada, Southern California, up into Oregon, up into Washington. It was absolutely incredible. I mean, it's a very romantic life, especially when you're madly in love and traveling around with your best friend doing it. And there is a little stress to not knowing where, there's a lot of excitement to not knowing where you're going to spend that next night, but also stress to it. We had way too many nights where, you're having the high beams on, going down some dusty, bumpy road, trying to figure out, somebody's here, dang it, on to the next one. And then Hannah especially experienced a little anxiety in certain areas of who's outside, who's lurking, who's going to come up. So you definitely deal with a little bit of that. I would say it wasn't always as romantic as it sounds, like a lot of, where should we go? Where are we going to camp tonight? But we were really trying to camp for free almost all the time. So we were, passing up campgrounds and different areas like that. We were able to, because of the stealth factor of the Ford Transit Connect, we had blinds in all the windows and stuff. A lot of times we would camp right downtown, just in the parking spot, things like that. But yeah, that was our intro into van life. We ended up applying for a seasonal job in northern Idaho and had a few experiences that decided that place was not for us. And I had a buddy at the time from college who was living here in Jackson. So we ended up quitting that job in northern Idaho that Hannah and I had together, came down to Jackson to try to figure it out. And this buddy of ours made it very evident that if we were okay living in our vehicles, it would be a very easy place to find work and live in your van for the summer. And we did just that. And then as winter came around, we both got a little tired of van life and waking up every morning, making our coffee in the park or somewhere on the sidewalk or curbside or up in Curtis Canyon or whatever. And then waking up early to come down and get to work. And Hannah would like be serving late and I'd park the van somewhere and drop her a pin and she'd come find me after she got off. I was already sleeping in back and drive me off to a place in the night, and then she'd be sleeping in the morning and I'd drive her down and I'd go to work and she'd wake up and figure it out. So it's a balancing act to say the least. But I don't regret a minute of it. It was an absolute blast. We still have the van. It sits in our driveway here and it's kind of become the weekend warrior, go down to the desert for a week and it's camping in style. I mean, I don't think we'll ever get rid of it. We love that thing.
It's funny to hear you talk about all those kind of challenges you face, because I think the idea of simplicity is so heavily preached, like, oh, just downsizing, getting rid of things, like life on the road, like what a simple existence. But like you're saying, there's so many factors and variables you have to weigh. And even when you're like in one location, right? Like, oh, you have a job and so does Hannah, then suddenly your schedule is completely messed up and you have to figure it out. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, driving around.
Go ahead.
I love the whole driving around and like kind of it's like putting on a show for each other of where is each other going to wake up. And I just remember like being little and, you fall asleep at your grandparents' house and you wake up and you're super disoriented. So it'd be fun doing like that in a van too.
Yeah, exactly. I give Hannah a lot of credit for doing it. I mean, we were, using the restrooms at public restrooms in the morning. She'd be putting her makeup on in the passenger seat in the little mirror and getting ready for work. And so, yeah, I give her a lot of credit. It definitely has changed a little bit with Yeti in the picture. It feels small now that he's almost 70 pounds in the back, and he loves to snuggle with us because we don't allow that at home. So it's only when we're camping. But I think we're going to actually build, and I don't know if you guys have done anything like this, anybody, we plan on building a kind of frame across the front two seats. So we're in the back sleeping. We can pull out something from under the mattress that's already in the back and put a rigid surface over kind of the armrests and the cup holders in the middle between the driver and passenger seat, and then put his dog bed on top. And we're hoping that'll make nights a little more comfortable, but got to play around with that prototype.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I also can I totally feel you when it comes to the opposite schedules and trying to make life work in that regard. I can't even imagine doing that in a vehicle / home that is constantly moving. Like we were doing the restaurant opposite schedule thing and like even the finding the bed at the end of the night. Like we went camping once and tried to find a place outside of Yosemite in the national forest, and it was the same thing. Nope, can't go there. Nope, can't go there. And then we found a spot, we set up the tent, and then we heard footsteps, and we were like, forget it now. And wound up sleeping in the car.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very romantic when you're traveling and you're on the road and you're visiting new places every day. It got more challenging as we were put in Jackson, both working jobs and using that as our home. I think Hannah would say she probably would not go back to doing that. I had a little more tolerance for it and found it a little more exciting than she did in the end, I think. So it's something I would definitely reconsider, but it would definitely be a challenge with a dog. We don't have that challenge when we're traveling. Everything's pretty pet friendly other than the national parks, and they at least let you drive through and walk your dog on pavement. But BLM Land National Forest, very dog friendly and has always been a blast for us.
Plus, I bet with Yeti, he's like a nice big fluffy blanket to keep you warm at night.
Extra warmth, you got it.
Nick and Devon, is Kelly as restrictive as Jackson is with I know that people in town here, you can't really park in any of the streets with a van and they kind of move you along after some time. Is Kelly a little bit more lax or?
Well, because it's such a residential area, people would notice. I think, what's the population here?
It's like 100 people,
Yeah, so
like year round.
and like everyone knows, because it's so small, everyone knows each other's vehicles. Like, unless you're parked outside of someone's front yard
Which is pretty
or
common.
in their driveway and they're inviting you to do so, then it's not really a place where you can just come and park, because people will notice and somebody will walk up and say something, because it's a tight-knit community. And
People, there's just like a lot of kids running around, and people are just very, very protective of the community, and I think more so because it's kind of like it's a little like gem out here. Like, you know, Jackson's awesome, but then we kind of have that luxury of being away from Jackson and not kind of dealing with the traffic and just a whole bunch of people. And a lot of the people that live out here are looking for that. So when somebody random just is parked on the side of the street, you know, they, like Devon said, they will notice and they will say something.
with that being said, there is the Rovant campground just down the road, which is the biggest campground of any national park in the entire country.
Wow.
Yeah. So okay, that's what I've been told.
I know.
So I think that, you know, if you're looking to pay, then that's like what grabs people over there. And then if you drive a little bit up the road, you get into the Bridger Teton National Forest, and you can park. You know, you can find parking places for free up there. So
Yeah, there's Shadow.
yeah,
Shadow
so
Mountain
there's
on a
there
short
are
drive. There's Ditch
a
Creek.
ton of places around Kelly where it would be really easy to access free parking. But Kelly specifically, not really. There is a yurt park that we live right next to, so a lot of people have their own vans and kind of have like the tiny home van or the yurt van situation. So there are a lot of vans dumping around over here, but like I said, everyone kind of knows who's is whose. It's so small.
Now that you guys mentioned that, it reminded me, my first night in Jackson was actually, it was with my girlfriend at the time, and we had no idea like anything about the town or where to go. And we were driving out around Kelly, and it was that exact situation of being dark at night and just like getting tireder and tireder. And finally you're just like, all right, this is something, I think it was like at an angle, and the whole car's packed with gear. So we're doing like the wrestling move to pack everything down and just sleep in place. So I guess it just depends on your tolerance, but there's places all over Jackson to tuck yourself into.
Totally. I mean, we've like, especially when I was traveling in that first van experience that I was talking about. I mean, we would sleep in Walmart parking lots and, you know, wherever you can find a space to sleep. Like if you're just tired and you need to rest for a little bit. So it's not always glamorous. You're not always going to wake up and see like a forest or, you know, a beautiful rock formation next to you. And that's okay. Like that's part of the experience of it. And I haven't lived long term in a van, so I can't speak on that fully. But while I was traveling, I mean, there were sometimes we would just park right next to the highway, and sometimes we were able to find BLM land or, you know, really, really nice little nesty spots. So it's a mix for sure.
It's always better going to one of those places where you can wake up and make your coffee with some sort of view and there's not cars humming by. But I will say we often, and maybe people weren't expecting two people to be sleeping in that van because it is smaller than most setups you see. We would camp, for those of you familiar, right at Miller Park. That was kind of our go-to. And that's the one public restroom we found that's open 24 hours and you have access to, which is nice to have that handy. And the cops here, I actually walked up to an officer and asked like what the legality of sleeping in the street is. And he basically told me, if we can't see you sleeping in the vehicle and your door's locked and we come pound on it and try to ask you to move, and like we don't actually have evidence looking through and seeing that you're in there, there's nothing we can do. So we would put up our blinds, and we kind of had these little magnet blinds that would go over the windows, and then curtains that came across the front. And it was, you know, and it all Velcroed together, and we spent majority of the time doing that, at least when Hannah was working late or when I had to work early, and never got a ticket, never got harassed. We did have one time where somebody came and knocked on it, and we were just like, oh, be quiet. Shh. They knocked twice and walked off, and that was our scariest moment of getting busted, I guess.
Your size of the van is pretty ideal in that realm, that you could park in a parking lot, and there's trucks in town that are way bigger than your van, right? It's not like one of those Mercedes-Benz huge ones where you roll up and everyone's like, look at that adventure mobile. Yours could be like some local painter's van and nobody would ever know.
Exactly. And that was part of our actually intention purchasing that, is that we did want to have that stealth factor and kind of incognito blend in wherever. So that was very intentional on our part.
Carly, a memo. Hi, by the way.
Hi.
I was just gonna ask with the tab. I feel like whenever I see cars with the tab, I'm just assuming they're like storing things in it. I don't really think of someone sleeping in it that often. Was that ever an issue for the both of you during your year?
Well, a lot of people are surprised to like know that we live in it. Like a lot of people were shocked. Like whenever we were, most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time we were in like dispersed camping. We didn't really try and pay, but in Canada it was a lot harder. The time free camping, we were in the Canadian Rockies, and it was a lot. You had to you would have to like backpack out basically to get free camping, which you did sometimes, but you'd still have to put the trailer somewhere. So, but as far as like,
can you really fast give us can you give us dimensions on the trailer so like people know basically?
Yeah, I'm not great about 5 feet by 12 feet.
Yeah, like roughly.
Basically what they did was they built it around a queen size mattress.
Yeah.
And so, I'm 6'1", 6'2", so I fit in there all the way. I can't, if I'm laying down, I can't put my arms up or anything like that. But yeah, so that's kind of the sleeping area. I can sit up. I can't stand up in it. If you want to see a picture of it, you can go to our Instagram. It's Teardrop Sabbatical if you're curious. But the back actually opens up, and we have a full-on kitchen.
Well, we don't have like a sink.
Yeah, we don't have a sink, but
camping kitchen. Yeah.
We've got a lot of storage. We've got we've got a just kind of Coleman stove, but
we have like a little drawer for our Yeti, so we can pull out our cooler, and then our stove pulls out too. We have a Coleman stove, so it's nice. But yeah, the sleeping area, it's just a bed, so there's we keep our books in there and then that's just our bed.
And the kitchen's kitchen would be above your feet, but you have to approach it from the back as if it's sunk, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it opens up. Yeah.
It's a pretty cool setup.
It's such a cool setup. I was also shocked when you parked it in our driveway. I was like, how in the world, until you showed us how it worked. And it's actually it's really smart how they're set up.
I really like that there's the bed is a different room basically. It's an own compartment, and the kitchen is a different compartment. And then we had a few drawers in the Subaru. We pulled up with the Subaru, so that was nice. The Subaru Outback. And so so it was we had all of our clothes were really dirty and muddy and stuff. We could just keep it, and all of our climbing gear and camping gear is all in our Subaru. So our bed was still separate. We were dirty, but everything else wasn't really. And then the kitchen was separate. So that was nice. But as far as
we realized we had a lot of space. So the first couple times we took it out, we took everything. We had all this kind of extra stuff. We were like, man, we're just carrying so much crap that we're 2 spatulas or things that you realize that you're like, oh man, I really only need maybe one of these.
And we don't use the spatula yet.
Yeah, so but yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, you realize how little you need, but yeah, you find some things that are pretty important. But
yeah, I'm looking at. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm looking at your Instagram, and the skylight is genius.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's so nice.
Pretty cool.
I bet that just gives you so much space. It feels like so much space. You feel less cramped. I like am shocked that you guys live in this thing.
It was really nice,
That's
but
amazing.
I mean, we were really lucky with weather. We hardly ever had to like hunker in our teardrop for a full day, and if we did, like local libraries were our favorite thing because we could either get air conditioning if it was we're in the desert, or if it was raining, we could at least just like be somewhere and it would be okay, and no one would be looking at you for not ordering or something like that. So we spent a lot of time in libraries.
Yeah.
But
Wi-Fi, you can fill up your water bottle most of the time. So yeah, we spent a lot of time in libraries. So we're big advocates of the public library.
Instagram is perfect. Teardrop sabbatical. You heard it here, folks. Follow this.
thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, it's cool. I mean, we love it. I mean, the thing I was probably more concerned with is because so basically the best thing about it is that we can go up to a campsite, park, put the trailer where we want it, detach, and then go off in the Subaru and do our thing, and then come back and we have our campsite kind of reserved. That's probably the best part of having a detachment piece of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the opposite of like the van life problem, because we're not like, we find the campsite first so we can drop the trailer, and then like we spend our day like doing things. But yeah, so it's, if we're looking for a space at night, it's a lot harder because
and you have to
have a trailer, so
you
it's
can't
harder.
just you have to be pretty strategic. And I don't know if you guys have ever backed up like a trailer or any kind of thing. It's there was a couple times where I was having to make some questionable kind of maneuvers, but you have to be a little bit more strategic about the road. I got pretty good at backing it up pretty quick. I'd never backed up a trailer before when I bought it, and so that was especially because it's so short that you make one little adjustment and it's jackknifing. So
jackknifing.
So are you guys living in it and just like traveling for fun right now, or are you guys like working as well? Is it kind of like bopping around to different scenic areas and like seeing the country, or how? It looks like it's got good clearance and you can get pretty much anywhere with it, huh?
Yeah, it's really, that is one of the parts that we love, is that we can go as far as we need to off into dispersed camping and put it there. And we bought like some extra locks for it. I don't think that we've ever had like a scenario where it wasn't in a good place, but just in case, you never know.
Yeah, I bought a boot or whatever they're called, so I lock up the tire, and then there's also, you can get a hitch lock, and then there's a couple other things you can do too.
But we weren't working with it. We quit our jobs and we decided to like just take time off. We kind of thought that maybe there would be a place where we'd want to stay for longer and we'd have to work, but we didn't ever run into that. We just kept going and not working and enjoying life. So
yeah, I mean, there's just so many. I don't know. You realize how many cool places there are. So kind of we've been, I don't know how many states we went to, like 15 states or something. But our longest leg was Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, Alberta, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. So that was a pretty long journey. But yeah, we went and visited Morgan and Will pretty early on in that trip and parked the trailer right in front of their little place and just hung out there, and we were roommates almost.
Yeah, very excited with our home. So we got through all the Jackson Hole, laws, I guess. We just lived
yeah, there you go.
In accordance.
Yeah.
Took advantage of the shower for sure. That was
that was the coolest thing, yeah.
So since you quit your jobs, did you guys save a bunch of money to have for that time period, the sabbatical, or did you or what did you do financially within that? Like, how did you save money? What did you splurge on? Did you, I don't know, whatever, you take it away.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I was living in Dallas. I was working at a bank. I wasn't super psyched on Dallas. I liked the company I worked for, but I wasn't super psyched on banking. So I thought, maybe in a couple of years, I'll take some time off. So I was kind of just saving a lot of money through that, and just kind of, eventually this will happen. But then I met Carly, and Carly had been in Dallas for 5 years when I first met you.
Yeah, I went to college in Dallas, so I'd been there too long already, and then
Yeah, so she was like, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of here. So then I was like, look, how about we save for about a year and a half? Let's try and get to this number or whatever. And, if we're here, we'll be pretty good, And so, yeah, that's kind of what we did. And we decided, let's just take as much time off as we can. And we work with our trailer company too, so we do some like marketing for them. So we post pictures and tag them and that kind of stuff. And if somebody buys a trailer through us, we get a cut. So that's pretty nice. We've only sold one trailer, but that's a couple months of traveling. So yeah, it
kind of stopped vlogging.
Yeah, it was crazy.
We got a little busy.
Yeah, it happened in like the first like month of our travels. So we were like, pretty shocked. But yeah, so that's kind of what we did. We just kind of, we didn't, I don't know. It ended up, I don't know. It just kind of, we budgeted, I guess, but it's kind of, it's just worked out. I don't know. It's been a lot cheaper than we expected, I think. And yeah.
Was the teardrop like entry pricing for anybody really, but like when you weigh, cause I wrote down a couple like options, like there's a camper like Nick and Devon done on the back of a truck, the rooftop tent, which my parents have, Airstreams, RVs, vans, the school buses, that like where in that realm does like the teardrop fall? I'm assuming near the bottom, I would guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it depends, right? Yeah. I mean, you could trick out your van and spend, 150 grand on it, right? So like, it just kind of depends. The company we found was, a small company out of Boulder. And so, it's more expensive than just kind of renovating a van, but it's definitely on the lower end of, I mean,
what was it, like 12?
Yeah, it was like 12 or something
12,000,
like that.
I think, yeah.
So it's pretty, I mean, it's not too bad considering how much we used it, and like, it's going to last us, I don't know, we're going to have it forever until we have to start making modifications on it for, if we get a dog or, kind of other things. So, but.
You all have power at all in it, or is it just like batteries for lights and whatnot?
Yeah, so it's basically powered by a Goal Zero Yeti. I forget what the product is actually called, but basically, so basically it's just like a little battery pack, and we're able to charge it with a solar panel. And so you can plug it into a wall if you're at somebody's house if you need to, but for the most part, I mean, it's really just we've got some lights in there, some LED lights. We've got a couple of inputs for like, USB port and a couple things like that. But yeah, it powers our whole unit. And I mean, we can go months, with the solar panel and just charging it as long as we get a good amount of sun on it. So
that solar panel fixed on the top, or one that you can move around to wherever it's
separate.
Yeah, it's separate. So we just kind of move it around and just kind of put it in the sun and just kind of, so we can park in the shade and then just kind of detach our little battery pack and then just put it on the side and put it in the sun and have the solar panel. And then
That's so cool.
Our rest day activity is the solar panel.
Yeah, making sure making sure I can charge the iPad and we can watch, Netflix or whatever.
Honestly, we have a fan in our right next to like the skylight, and the fan is what takes up the most battery. So if it's like a hotter night or anything like that, that takes up the most. But usually we don't need it. It just depends where we are. If you're in the mountains, you won't really need the fan, but we spent a lot of time in the desert when we kind of needed it.
Yeah.
So living in it, I'm curious what things you started that experience with that you thought you would want, and what were things like as you got into it more that you realized you didn't have that you wanted, or you realized originally you thought would be really good that maybe weren't as valuable? Was there anything that came out?
I mean, the fan for me, like I thought I was going to need the fan quite a bit, but we were pretty strategic. If it was getting hot, we'd go north. If it was getting cold, we'd go south, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that was kind of one thing. I'm trying to think.
I like that though, like very seasonal. Just it kind of goes back to just instincts of like what animals do. I never thought of that.
Yeah. One thing we got. Well, his parents were a little concerned about us not showering, so they sponsored us with a solar shower, and we only used that like twice. So I thought that I would like really like it and just like always want to rinse off, but like. One, you have to be like super secluded to use it, or in a forest where there's trees, and a lot of times we weren't even in a forest, so we couldn't like easily get secluded.
In the desert where it's flat. And
everybody can see. And so so that was something that I was like excited for them to like give it for us, but we ended up hardly ever using it. So that was like something that sounds like a really good idea, but we
I
would.
like that's what your parents' gift was of like, we need you to practice hygiene when you're out doing the hippie lifestyle.
Oh, for sure. It's always people's number one question is the showering thing. And my supervisor, like before I quit my job, like that was my going away gift. She gave me like, she Venmoed me $50 as like a shower fund. She was like, please keep bathing. And it was
If you
like,
need more, just please text me.
yeah, so that was pretty funny. But yeah.
Yeah.
With the renovation process, like quickly from the teardrop crew on that, because I want to hear Nick where Nick's at with his build out. When you went through that process, did they for the teardrop? Did they have like options for the inside? Did you get to customize that yourself? What was that that process like?
Yeah, I mean, they're a pretty fun company to work with. They do a lot of, I don't know, they're kind of always working on new things. But, you know, like if I had an idea for something, which I didn't really have.
You had no ideas, honestly.
Yeah, we were trying to think of things to like, you know, give him, but we didn't really have a whole lot to give him. But there's been like people that I know that have reached out to us and just kind of asking about it. And like, they're asking, can we add an AC unit? Is that a possibility? And so like some people put AC units in their trailers. You can also add a roof nest on top of it. Yeah, there's different woods. They've kind of gone away from it, but ours on the inside is beetle kill wood. So all the wood that was affected here in Colorado, they're able to reuse it. I'm trying to think what other things you can customize, like how like your tires if you wanted more intense tires, or there's quite a few things. I mean, it's pretty.
Yeah, and like you can a lot of people like put a propane tank on it, which we didn't do, and we would never use it, I don't think, but that's like a pretty common thing for people. Yeah, the AC thing. And then also, yeah, you can hook a shower, like a hose type system on the outside of the teardrop too. I mean, the problem with that is that if you use it, then you create mud. So you have to make sure that you can like get out. You don't want to
connected to the trailer.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, you pop out of the trailer and you don't want to be stepping in a bunch of mud. So, but I'm trying to think.
What else we said no to. Those two things
you can add. There's like a box. You can add like a storage type of thing. You can add like a bike rack on it too. So I mean, I don't know if there's something you're into and they think it's possible. They like challenging themselves, and yeah, like I know I've gone up a couple times just to talk to them and stuff, and some people have like just little holes in there for wine bottles or like booze. Or, like,
yeah,
I don't know how that works. Like, I'm sure that's just gonna bounce around back there, but I don't know.
And they're starting to do like magnetic like spice racks too, like you do in a house, but they're doing that in the teardrops now. So stuff like that.
All the necessities.
Yeah.
Did you guys look into any other any other styles of campers, or was it teardrop kind of? I feel like that's a good weight and size for having a Subaru.
Yeah, that was one of the things too. I had a Subaru Outback, so I was like, man, I can't really pull a whole lot. So this company, they kind of make them for Coloradans, and a lot of Coloradans have Subaru Outbacks or Subarus, so that's kind of what their goal was when they made this trailer. There's a couple other companies. I think
looked at the hiker campers. They're like
hiker
trailers.
Yeah, so that one's more boxy, but yeah, so there's a couple companies. I mean, there's a company I think out of Bend that makes trailers too. But yeah, there's tons of, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know, the teardrop style is just pretty cool. I don't know.
But we definitely looked at like roof tents. We weren't sure that a teardrop would be like financial, like we weren't sure that would be an option for us. So like when we first talked about like quitting our jobs, leaving Dallas and living on the road, like we were considering all options because we just weren't sure like what our budget would be. So we looked at like roof tents. We thought about like just living in the Subaru itself, and like we're really happy we didn't have to do that. But
I don't know how to do that.
I always thought it was kind of funny how like when you're camping or in like a camping area, everybody's always like, hey, like, you mind if I see your setup? And you're constantly like bouncing ideas off of people. I'm sure here you had a lot of people, and like those teardrops kind of have a cult like following,
For sure, yeah.
So I'm sure you had a lot of people who were like, can I take a peek? Like, what did you guys do? It's kind of fun bouncing ideas, and we learned a lot of tips that way on how we can be like a little bit more efficient with things and what we could all utilize and what other people were doing. It was like, wow, that's smart. I know, just like walking around some of these national forests and dispersed camping areas, we learned a lot that way.
Tony,
Yeah.
did you ever do that to someone and they're like, yeah, I guess, and they open it up and they were like a painter or a plumber or someone?
Not really. I was never the one to approach that as kind of like if somebody wanted to see ours, it'd be like, yeah, let's check out yours now. So I wasn't just going up to random people and be like, dude, can I check out your van?
I mean, but Brian, it isn't the most common thing to go to a campsite and have your full painting work equipment there with you.
They could be a nomadic painter. I don't know.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
Nick, where are you at in your build out right now? Like the creativity component of it is like fascinating to me. Is that something that you are just feeling like, oh man, like I know exactly what I want to do because you've done the build out or you've worked with a trailer in the past? Or do you like have a million ideas that you're trying to land them somewhere? What's that like?
Well, currently I'm in the dry fitting and furring stage. So, like the countertop and drawers and the bed. I mean, the bed frame's built and in there, and the countertop's in there. The subfloor's already in. And now it's just like I built everything so that when we put up the walls, we put in the insulation and all that. I can take everything out as one unit. So I can take the whole bed frame out as one piece and, unbolt it from the sides of the van, turn it on its side and walk out with it. And then same thing with the countertop, we can unbolt it from the floor and just kind of carry it out. And then that way we have a free, clean space to put in insulation and make sure everything fits. Just because I've personally never worked with a van. What we built out was like it was like a slide-in camper.
Which has angles. It's
Hard,
rectangular.
hard right angles everywhere. So
With the van, there's like these weird curves, and one side is not symmetrical to the other
Yeah.
side.
There's a lot of trial and error. So that's like, I think that's the biggest thing that people don't realize or like think about if they're going to do a van, at least. Like when you first dive into it, it matters how much investigation and how much reading you do on it. But it doesn't really prepare you for actually doing it, because then you're like in it and it's kind of like hands-on carpentry or hands-on like engineering. Like you have to figure out how stuff is going to fit and dry fit.
Are you all familiar with the scribing technique?
Yeah, so that's how we did the subfloor.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, what else? And then I did.
What is a scribing technique?
It's like it was. I think originated with boat builders, but you essentially it's a process of figuring out. If you have a curve that you're needing to cut a piece of wood to, it's a tool that's basically like a compass. You make a circle with, and you can use that where it's kind of like if this is the curve that you're trying to mimic and these are the compass, you kind of ride your tool along it and then it scribes this line into it, so that gives you a pattern to cut to.
Yeah.
Brian, is the idea of that just to maximize or minimize the amount of wasted space, I'm assuming?
Yeah, because you wouldn't want to have especially in small spaces like that, it's just finished work. Like we do it when we're doing carpentry on our jobs, just to have a really like crisp connection between two different materials. So you don't have this gap that looks unfinished or not like finely done.
Mm-hmm.
So Devon and Nick, are you guys custom building all of your the interior, like cabinets and stuff? I know our friend Tyler, who built out his van, bought a cabinet set from IKEA, like a kitchenette with a table and like a 2-burner range. I mean, like a sink that can be like converted into a table, and it has a couple like a closet-y type thing and a couple of drawers on the bottom. I mean, like cabinets. And then he kind of built like custom stuff around it. So that was like in the interior of the van. Like, what are you guys doing for storage and stuff like that?
So.
Yes, he's doing everything custom.
Yeah, I'm building everything custom. And when we did the camper, like that was kind of our biggest leap forward, because I had grown up in a house that was like constantly under construction. My dad was like rehabbing the whole house my entire childhood. So I did a lot of like electrical work and plumbing and carpentry like my entire young life. And then when we bought that camper, it kind of like stepped into the realm of like, okay, I can make my own space. So, you know, how do I want to do this? And we sat down I bought the thing first before really planning on it. I kind of bought it on a whim. Like we were down at her dad's house for 4th of July and I saw it online and I was like, all right, I'm gonna take your car and drive up and buy it, and bought it. And then literally we spent like 2.5, 3 weeks like drawing different sketches and, you know, trying to work out, okay, well, I would like this here, you know, how does that work for you? Okay, well, you know, compromises and stuff like that. So now currently, I think my whole goal behind it is functionality, because the camper was functional, but it was really cold. And that's the main reason. I mean, I was out here in the winter by myself every night, getting off work at 12 or even 1 in the morning, and then firing up a wood stove in a random, you know, parking spot. And I don't really want to do that anymore. So.
But yeah, so he has designed everything, and we're trying to do it as cost efficiently as possible. So it's definitely going to be pretty minimal in there.
Yeah.
And is the wood fire stove making it into the van, or is that?
Oh no, the camper's gone. We got rid of it.
Yeah, we sold the camper.
It was so old and decrepit, and we redid the ceiling on it, but I didn't plan for a Wyoming winter. I'd never seen a Wyoming winter or a Wyoming summer.
Mm-hmm.
So that expansion and contraction cracked the roof really, really bad. And it basically, all the insulation in the ceiling just filled up with water. It froze over like the winter, and then it broke the ceiling. So I sold it to a guy I knew from the village, and he's currently living in it, like actively, and he loves it. He still messages me every once in a while and asks me questions like, you know, how do I get this stovepipe to go out through the ceiling and not through the side of the wall? Or, you know, how do I figure out this thing? And, you know,
he's asking you why his roof is caving in.
well, it was so funny.
He made that known.
Yeah. When I told it to him, I told him, I was like, hey, so I don't know if you noticed this, but there's a big bulge. I put it in the ad that the ceiling, you know, it's cracked. And he's like, oh no, it's no problem. It's cool. And he was so cool with it, like so fine with it. He was like excited for the adventure of like building it. And I think most of the structural work was already done. We had put in this really nice live edge, 2-inch thick cherry countertop that our friend Bill, Devon's friend Bill, she was like working for him, like doing a work trade type thing with him, this older gentleman in New York, and he cut down this cherry tree on his property and gave us this beautiful slab, and we made it our own. So,
Yeah, that's so cool.
Tony,
Nick, when you were looking at different vans, did you look at anything besides kind of the Sprinter style, like the 16-passenger vans with a pop-up roof, or any of the other camper vans?
Like the other options as opposed to the one that we have now?
Yeah, good, because that's something that I've started to really look and do some research in, and it seems like, you know, Sprinter is kind of a very popular option, but just curious if there's other stuff that you considered.
So actually, when I decided I was going to buy one, I went to Yeti, just south of town, to the Ford dealership, and they let me take home for the night a Ford Transit van, the long one, but it was just a normal height van. It wasn't the high top.
Yeah.
Which didn't, like, walking in there for what to make a purchase like this, it felt like it needed to be something that we could stand up in.
Totally.
You know, needed to be like the dimensions that felt right, and so that didn't feel good.
Yeah. So I did a lot of research on the transit vans because I really wanted one of those, like a high top, short wheelbase one, because they as an option, you can get all-wheel drive now, newer ones. But I kept coming to this drawback of that they have issues with, there's like leaking by the front windowsill sometimes, where it leaks onto the electronics in the engine bay. So that kind of steered me away from that. And then the Mercedes, the Sprinter van, I really wanted one. But again, like there's kind of drawbacks to all of them. So the Mercedes, if you get one of those, if something breaks and you want the code to go away, you don't want the dashboard to be flashing at you all the time and telling you that something's wrong, and you kind of want to know when something is wrong, you have to bring it to a Mercedes dealership. And that's not necessarily cost effective if you're not, if you're not
There's
really
no
on a
Mercedes dealership around here.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to drive all the way to Idaho Falls or even to Salt Lake to even go to a reputable Mercedes dealership to get it fixed. So that was out the window. I also heard bad things about their four-wheel drive from a number of people. And then the ProMaster I really wanted because I think they're kind of cute.
They're wide. They have a really good width to them, so it feels very, very spacious. And we're used to a small space. It's like only a little bit smaller than what we're already in right now.
Yeah, I mean,
is the ProMaster not the you said that you're dealing with curves? Is it? I'm sorry. What was the other option you first mentioned? That one has straight walls, correct?
The Ford Transit van?
Yes. Yeah.
So like all the vans really have curves, right? They kind of have to have curves it's all about aerodynamics and safe weight and stuff like that, and then structural integrity. So they all have curves, and they're all really designed for trade workers. That's what vans were originally made for. They're for people working at them. So there's all these weird little like ports for plugs and different pneumatic tools. So like there's a lot of things pre-built into the van that you kind of have to work around. And that's like where the interesting part comes, because like currently I'm still trying to wrap my head around running electric through some of those weird portholes and putting them in places that I can actually access them.
I will say that like he hasn't done electric, and like a lot of the things that he's doing and assisting with, but like it's his brainchild. He's been researching, like watching YouTube videos, so it's completely self-taught. Like it's something that he's like constantly researching, he's constantly reading about and constantly watching like how-to videos, and that's his process or our process of creating this space.
It actually just occurred to me. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's just rad.
It just occurred to me that our friend Tyler, the guy who had the IKEA cabinets, is actually in one of the ProMasters as well. So I wonder if, and he has all the blueprints that he had done, or because he did the same thing you did, watched a ton of YouTube videos, figured it out. I wonder if maybe you'd be interested in, I could get you guys into contact. I don't know, maybe bounce ideas off of you. Or
because I know the wiring was like a big struggle. And I remember like we would go climbing and I would stay in it while he was like learning to build it out. And he would be like, don't touch that wall. Like those are live wires. That's like a work in progress. but now it looks great. It's like really, really good.
Nick, are you curious? Are you curious how to run the wires to be able to access them in the future?
Yeah, so like again with like the cabinets and the bed so far, like that's how I've been building everything, so that if I need to take things out, I can just reach in with a drill for the cabinets and pop it right out, and the whole thing comes out. And with the bed, use the ratchet to do that. Behind the countertop, there's this little strip with little plastic covers on it. And right behind the driver's seat is where our battery bank is going to sit. So the wires actually don't have to run that far. We're not going to do solar just because it's ridiculously expensive unless I bought like a Goal Zero, like what you guys have in the teardrop. But I wanted to use a battery isolator because I drive to work every day. And I use the van every day, but I want to use a smart isolator because it lets your engine charge your starting and running battery up to a certain point. And then when it gets to that point, it switches over to your reserve batteries, you could call them. So it'd be like 200-watt batteries at a total of 200 watts. That goes to an inverter, and then that would literally run about 5 feet and then up a wall to one single plug.
Do you have experience with that, Brian? Is that why you're out?
Yeah, because one thing, like with doing commercial electrical work, like in a house, in a residential house, you're running it through the walls and you're stapling it in place. So there's really not an easy way to just be able to like pull wires out of an outlet. But with commercial, they run conduit, so it's just a tube that you then like push all the wire through, and so that they make it that way so that in the future you can, if you have to retrofit it, you can. It's a tool called a snake, and it's like a long, kind of stiff wire, but it's still flexible. So you can you have access points for that conduit, and then that way you can kind of thread this piece of wire through and just be able to like pull different wires or add wires differently. So maybe that's something that you could look into if you're wanting to be able to retrofit it or add or change it out down the road. Because that's conduit that, it's like 3/4 inch thick. And, since it's in a van already, you might have to get something that's plastic just to be flexible to kind of go through the van. But that might be an option.
I've looked into those. They're kind of like ribbed conduit sheets, and they're kind of like split down the middle. So I've looked into those just because if there's any like moisture that builds up in the walls in between the insulation and the actual outside metal, if anything like that starts happening, I really don't want to have live wires just kind of, charging the outside of the van. That would really, really suck if I got out and touched the wall and got zapped.
Yeah.
I'd be really interested to talk to you further about that, because I've run some electrical in our tiny home, and it's terrifying, honestly.
Yeah. Well, my nickname, like most electricians, was Sparky. So I'll give you theoretical advice, but maybe don't rely on me for
Sparky.
actually doing it.
No, Brian, that's not your nickname with everybody.
What's that?
That's not your nickname with everybody.
No.
No. Tony, a little pivot. You had mentioned some kind of like tricks of van life that like you gave us an idea of what that entails. I guess a little bit more background there.
Yeah, we were just like, when we initially hit the road, we were pretty fresh to everything. So I would say a lot of the tips and tricks that we were looking for is like, all right, how do we fit everything in our little cooler? So like we'd go grocery shopping, and then we come out of the grocery store and sit in the parking lot and like chop up all our veggies and put them into like Ziploc bags so they were much smaller, and then put it in the small cooler. Because in this van, space was definitely of the essence. Everything had its spot, and like one addition, it wasn't going to happen. So there was a lot of tricks towards like just space wise and like what you really need and what you don't need. And like you guys in the teardrop, you really realize definitely after a month on the road of like what you are not utilizing and what you can use for multiple things. So we kind of had this rule after Hannah and I moved into the van and kind of moved our whole lives into there, that if the item didn't have at least 2 purposes, it wasn't going to come along. And that was a good trick for us. A lot of the other tricks were really like finding restrooms, finding Wi-Fi, and then like tips on just where to go and look for this free camping. We did fall back on a lot of like state campgrounds and things like that when we needed to. But like I said, the goal of our travels was really to camp for free everywhere we were going. So I'd say a lot of the tips just came through that of like, talking to other people on the road, highlighting areas on the maps, recognizing what BLM land looks like, what the requirements are of like being out there, putting your fires out, having a shovel to dig your poop holes in the morning, and everything else. So Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other specific tips that really, I mean, we were huge suckers for the like at Target, you can get the little LED lights with the battery pack on them and you can like stick it up on the side of the van and then we'd like pin it up to the ceiling and run those all the way through and you like change the batteries once a year or every 6 months or something, which is great. Goal Zero, we have a lot of little like just the fold out solar panel that you can put your little an extra battery on to charge a phone or whatever. I forget what those little things are called, those little battery.
Yeah.
So like just learning like different things like that. We ended up, you know, if you kept the phone plugged in overnight, one morning our van didn't start and we're out in the national forest and we had to wait like 2 hours for somebody to come by and jump us. So then getting like a self jumper cable system and things like that were trial and error and things that we had learned from other people that were like, hey, you better get one of those jumper systems in your car now because you're going to be out in the boonies somewhere and you might not see anybody for days, let alone 2 hours. So different tips like that were super helpful. And then popping into like the National Forest Ranger Centers and talking to those guys and like really just learning, you know, what looks like a good road, avoiding private property. And some of those tips I think were really useful to us.
If anyone's interested, I use this app for hunting, but there's an app called Onyx Maps, and you can get it for like one state or all the states, and it has GPS on it, so it knows where you are and it shows what different properties, like what different land is, if it's BLM or national forest or private. So if you guys are wanting to, once the pandemic ends and you're getting back in the teardrop, I always felt like that was a useful resource to have.
Yeah, we use a couple apps too. There's one called Campendium, which works pretty well to find free camping. And there's another one called that works pretty well. And we, you know, usually people are pretty active on it. You know, people.
What was that second one you mentioned?
I think it's
iOverlander, I think.
Yeah, that's what we used and found a lot of great campsites.
Yeah.
People can leave reviews and like if you have cell service and like
Yeah.
it can be quite helpful.
You can also use like freecampsites.net or something like that. That one we use like very rarely, but yeah, there's a couple apps that are pretty good. That was very helpful for us. And you can, you know, sometimes find free camping or at least, you know, $5 camping, you know, if you're in a bind and you really just want to, you know, make sure you have like a true campsite and maybe a bathroom.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are some good.
Tony, did living in the van change the way that you live, like after you moved out of the van? Like living in a home after that, did you change the way like you buy things or the amount of things you own, or in the future, like do you see yourself not wanting to own a house because it's too big and you don't need all that stuff? Or
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say the answer is absolutely yes. We now live in a little bit of a bigger cabin than Devon and Nick, but it's 400 square feet. So I guess it's twice the size of theirs, which some days feels big, especially after we moved out of the van. We've been here 3.5, almost 4 years now. So it's starting to feel smaller too, because you do accumulate things when you have more space. But it absolutely changed our lifestyle. I wouldn't say we're minimalist, but we try not to have anything that we don't need. Like to keep it tidy, like to keep it organized. And I think that was a trait we both learned in van life, because you very quickly learned if you don't put things back where they need to go, it just becomes a mess so quickly. And I particularly was very anal about being on top of keeping it organized. But yeah, I think like down the road, we really don't need anything bigger than what we have now. We talk about living in a yurt eventually, trying to get some land and doing something along those lines. I think we will always, I doubt, unless we're traveling and like trying to figure out where we may want to settle again, if we pick up and leave Jackson, I don't think we'll move into it permanently. But we will definitely keep it as like an adventure vehicle. And we love to go on 2-week road trips and, you know, visit different areas and kind of revisit the van life days that we were living.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely, it's funny. It appeals to people like, I mean, a lot of us that are already living in small places, excuse me, Like Tony's living in a 400 square foot, Devon and Nick are in a 200 square foot. We're like, what, 450, 400? We have like high ceilings, so it feels a little bigger. So the downsizing into the van life doesn't feel, I think, as traumatic as it would feel going from like the full house, a garage, right? I mean, none of us have garages. Like, can you imagine taking all of that and moving it into, like, oh my gosh. So it's funny to hear, Tony, that like it was something that you learned. Did you come from a small living situation before that, or is this kind of
Yeah, not necessarily. Yeah, I grew up in a fairly big house and had never really lived in a tiny home or a small, 400 square foot cabin or anything along those lines. So I think the van life just, we kind of were, our quest was always to just figure out how to do like minimal harm to the planet and live as sustainably as possible. And van life in a lot of ways kind of seemed to meet that. People could definitely argue against that as well, I think. But it made us that it was a good jump to like being more minimalist and really even here in our cabin, like if it's something, we've got like Hannah and I will hold each other accountable. Hey, if you haven't worn this and if you will like put our clothes on the hangers a certain direction and you'll pull it off and it's like, hey, we haven't worn that in like 6 months or a year. Do we really need that? And kind of the same thing within the van. I wouldn't say everything has two uses, but we try to, with the exception of all the plants that we've accumulated, we try to have everything have a use here. And yeah, we don't have too many unnecessary items.
I think that lifestyle is sort of might be like a thing that our generation is really going to start to bring to our future. Like I feel like the idea of us owning our own large homes like our parents did or their parents before them, that American dream, I think has really been warped, potentially for the better, not necessarily warped in a bad way, but I'm curious to know like how van life is going to change the way that we live our lives as, middle-aged adults. Like, how are we going to live our lives now, like moving forward in our 20s, 30s, 40s, and what will that do to the rest of the world? I'm very curious to know because it seems like van life is incredibly popular right now. It's all over Instagram, it's all over Reddit, and it's like all of you have mentioned, it's a very romantic idea, and many people want that. And so it's interesting to have this conversation and hear all of the pros and cons from all of you guys, because we've definitely thought about it, like very seriously, like have been saving money to do this. And yeah, I don't know. What do you think? I'm going to put that out to everyone else. Like, how do you feel? Do you think this is going to be
the pandemic component? I think is really interesting. That like I think that there's a freedom you get with van life. Again, not having done it myself, but that isn't a very alluring component, and that we're in this space right now where even van life, living small, living on the road, is not really that liberating because you're worried about touching a gas pump, right? You're worried about going to a new city. Like, I mean, I had a buddy driving from Oregon to Minnesota in the past couple of weeks, and he's like, "Hey man, can I come and crash with you on the way?" And we said no because it was like, "Hey, like, I mean, love you to death, we're best friends, but with where we're at right now in society, in the world, that it feels as if you coming from a city, going to another city and back again, just is not the right time."
Yeah.
And so I think it's almost like a two-part question because with the realities of where we're at, it's one conversation, but then assuming we get past all of this, that it's a completely different paradigm, which is pretty cool. I think you're right that people are feeling more and more like, I think highlighted by the pandemic, that people are focusing on what really matters. And like, okay, well, I'm spending so much time inside. Why do I need all these things? Like, I miss my friends, I miss traveling, I miss seeing people. And that van life, I wouldn't be surprised if it had like another little like spike after this, where people are like, I just need to get out, right? I just need to go and do it.
On the other hand, though, to play devil's advocate for that, because I agree, but I also think the pandemic has really highlighted stability for people. And like those, I work in the yoga industry, a lot of instructors who make their money off of teaching classes, and like X amount of classes per week is what they have budgeted that they need, and they're not getting that right now. And I think a lot of people who have jobs who know that they're getting a paycheck, that's been almost highlighted. Like, there are really big benefits of having that stability, monetarily, but also like a place that you can call your own, that you know it's going to be there. Like, so that just, yeah, it's also interesting to think that I think right now a lot of the people I know who are super free spirited and do a million different things are kind of in this place right now where they're like, I understand why stability would be really nice to have. So I think it's double.
I think it's kind of like both of you guys have really good points, because I think, it's like, I guess MJ, like, you could be a yoga instructor and teach online, but it's a very different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you were online, I don't know how feasible that is with being in a van. And like, I'm the same way. Like, I can't work from home being a carpenter. But I think for the people that, I think there's a huge majority of people that realize, like, you know what, like, I don't have to go into an office to do my job. And I think like up until now, the job has been what has kept people in that realm of like, I need to stay here. I need to stay in a home to have that level of comfort and security in my job. But you're like, I mean, you can deck these vans out to be, it's a mini home, and it's definitely like very out of the norm. But it's like, if your job's not holding you back because you've been able to do it from home for the last couple of months, like, if you want to go adventure, why not? Why not put that money that you would into rent into a trailer or a van and be flexible to go where you want?
Yeah, I think it's also important to kind of realize that, with van life, there's a certain responsibility that comes with it and almost a dark side to it. You see, and I would blame probably social media for ruining a lot of these really pristine, beautiful places. And everybody wants to back their van up and wake up to that view and get that perfect picture. And then, you've also seen areas around here, like up in Curtis Canyon, they get closed down because they're so overused, and so many people are burying their feces on top of other poo, and it becomes a serious issue, and people aren't doing that properly, and not burying things or not cleaning up their trash and all that. So I think there's a lot of people that want to run into it, but I think it's important to slow down and like do it really respectfully and responsibly, especially to our earth and all these places that we are going out on BLM land and national forest. You oftentimes look at like all the positives to it, but there is, I think, a certain dark side or responsibility that you need to consider with it.
Have that stewardship mentality, even though you're not in a tent.
Absolutely.
I think that raises an interesting question. Like, I feel like we all have similar motivations to be interested in the outdoors or want to pursue a more minimalist lifestyle. But I'm curious, like Carly and Memo, when you guys decided to quit your job, like, was there anxiety around that? And I think all of us here have pretty similar personalities and interests, but I imagine there were people in your lives that were like, you're going to do what now?
Yeah, I mean, I worked at a bank. I worked at a bank in Dallas. So when I told everybody, I was like, yeah, I'm going to quit my job and travel for a year. They're like, are you sure? You got a pretty stable job, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, of course, there's always anxieties, right? I mean, it's anytime you're doing something that's a little out of your comfort zone, you're going to be anxious and excited and nervous. And, for a lot of people, you pull up to a campsite for the first time, or you pull up to some BLM land for the first time. You don't know who's there, or, there's always little things that are scary. But, at the same time, if somebody's on that road or somebody's out, camping, they're likely going to keep to themselves and kind of, I don't know, but there's always a little bit of it, but
I think like overwhelmingly, I think I was expecting more like pushback from people, but that was actually, I felt like odd, like more 9 times out of 10 people would be like, oh my gosh, like I would love to do that, but I would never ever quit my job. Or like, they would be like, if only I could, I don't know. Everyone seemed to like think that it would be like, it's like the dream, right? Like to not have a job and travel. Like, I think that's kind of a pretty, even if it's not in a van, just to like not work and travel is kind of like almost a universal dream. And so I think like, yeah, overwhelmingly people were like really supportive of it and like really curious about it. And like I said, like the showering thing or like the
what are you gonna eat, or like, you know, just
Yeah.
kind of, I don't know, how are you gonna charge your phone, like, you know, just all kinds of random questions. But I mean, yeah, I would say the same too, is that a lot of people are overwhelmingly supportive. Yeah, we had a lot of good friends and family that were just really supportive of us. So that was very helpful for us. And you know, we have we've made a lot of friends along the way, and you know, reconnected with you two, you know, Carly and Morgan, you know, that you guys haven't seen each other in a long time. And so yeah, I don't know, it's just been really cool just meeting people and just kind of, I don't know, just making connections. I don't know. Anybody that's thinking about it, I think you should at least try and do it, you know, if it's for a short period of time, or you know, it's good to be out of your comfort zone and do things that are a little different. And
I think that's the perfect note to end the evening on, to give it a shot. I did put the at Teardrop Sabbatical, their handle on the little chat there, so everybody check it out. Nick, if you do start recording any of your build out, love to follow along in that as well. But yeah, really appreciate all you guys spending the time to talk through it this evening. And I mean, I think there's a lot of other offshoot conversations to come here soon. Miss you all, and we'll hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for the delicious ingredients and recipe
Yeah,
too.
of course.
I like it.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.
yeah, and thanks for setting this up. Well, I mean, this is, I don't know, something that we've missed for sure, is just kind of, you know, having conversations and eating dinner with people and, you know, meeting new people. So it's been really great. I enjoyed it.
Good. Yeah, great crew.
Keep the adventure going, guys.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye, thank
See you
you.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.